Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fireside Chat by EcoITCon. EcoITCon aims to bring in experts from around the globe to understand their views on an important topic of sustainability and how it affects all of us in the technology space. I'm your host, Archana Joshi. Today, we have an interesting topic ahead of us, which is sustainable insurance and InsurTech. To discuss this topic, I have an equally interesting guest with me, Brijesh Prabhakar. Welcome, Brijesh. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Archana. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and happy to be part of EcoITCon. And it's a topic that's very close to my heart. Two topics, insurance and sustainability. So, happy to have this discussion with you.
Thanks, Brijesh. So just a little bit about Brijesh. Brijesh is an industry veteran. He has over 24 years of industry experience, and he has helped several large organizations to bring in the digital transformation. I mean, you name all the Fortune 500 companies, and he's been associated in some way or the other. Companies like General Motors, Walmart, AXA, Travelers Insurance, all of this is something which Brijesh has closely worked with. He has also developed one of the most comprehensive technology platforms for privacy protection to comply with the GDPR regulations that are very prevalent in the European region. During COVID, he has conceptualized and also spearheaded development for remote collaboration platform for developers, product managers, and the agile pods that we have. He, of course, is passionate about different topics within technology, insurance, and sustainability is something which is equally close to his heart. Today, he heads the global delivery unit for insurance within the LTIMindtree. And I would say perfect guest for us today to talk to us about insurance and sustainability. So if
I feel very old after this introduction, Archana.
Yeah. So if I just take this topic a little bit ahead, when you look at what is happening around us, I know I was during the New Year time, I was on vacation, and suddenly out of the blue, rain was there in the place where I was, where it's usually expected to be dry spell and cold winters. And you also keep on hearing news in the media everywhere saying that, hey, rain created a havoc, there's droughts, floods, all of these kind of things are happening. And insurance industry kind of sits right in the middle of this because it also has a role to mitigate some of the risks that come with this climate change. And also it has a responsibility to predict how it will affect the entire world with this climate change happening. So with that, Brijesh, what is your view? What is happening in the insurance industry and how are they addressing this space?
So, Archana, you talk about unusual rain, right? But a lot of unusual things are happening. And, anybody who has been looking at sustainability and, global warming, you see a trend, right? And we talk in terms of critical countries, for example, the countries that are going to be most affected, because of rising waters, right, rising sea levels. I think these are all things that is discussed very, very openly in the media, and there's a lot of awareness about it. But then there are a lot of other things, when you try to do a double click, you get into a lot of the nuanced aspects. For example, right, cars today that you have running around on the roads today have been built to operate under certain conditions, right? Between certain temperatures, -5 degrees, whatever, to some amount, of heat. Now, when global warming, when you add the unpredictability, right, nature of global warming, the AC is running longer than what you would have normally, built a car for, right? Chillers that are that are cooling your offices work harder, right? So there are many of these things that happen, which basically means many of the equipment that we have in factories, at home, alarm systems that you probably have, that trips at a certain temperature, IoT devices that you have outside in the open, all of these start to degrade a lot faster, right? Because they're not expected to work in these kind of environments, right? And this is only getting worse. Now, what does an insurance company do? We take, insurance is about predicting a lot of the future, right? When you talk about life, we talk about mortality tables. We assume that a person is going to live for X amount of years, and after that, you start giving back, the money to, whoever is left behind. So a lot of this is being challenged today in the insurance industry. I think the traditional industry, the traditional view of insurance is going to take a radical rethink. If it's not already happening now, in the next 3 years, we are going to see a fair amount of rethink happening around these areas.
So you brought out an interesting point there, Brijesh, saying that it's going to change. So one, you have to look at existing insurance products that are offered to adapt to this change. But do you also see an opportunity in this whole space for the insurance companies, which they can look at? And how do you think technology can help them achieve these kind of opportunities?
You see, I mean, today, if you were to put up a factory, right, you have to run through a whole bunch of loopholes. You have to give them an environmental certificate. There's a bunch of regulatory stuff that you do. And it's not even a factory that's going to be very polluting. It can be very simple about garments being, done, not about textiles. I mean, these are all, considered to be a little polluting. But even if you're going to set up a very simple factory, you need a bunch of these things. In insurance company, we are not encumbered by any of these kind of regulations today, right? Now, today, if you were to look at environmental activism and, some of the things that's actually pushing for faster adoptions of regulation, I think if regulatory compliance has to be done and it has to be managed and it has to be, it has to be adhered to, then you're going to see, a fair amount of uptick in, insurance, carriers becoming a little bit more conscious, right? Because I firmly believe, all good intent, is very nice. Very few people, do anything because of intent. But when regulatory pressures come in and they are given a timeline, you comply. I mean, we have seen GDPR come in, privacy was always there, but the moment GDPR came in, a lot of things changed, right? Look at COVID, what it did, right? People were still traveling around with the mask, till March. But the moment the government came in and said, you can't do this, and here are the 10 commandments, 15 rules, 25 things, everything changed, right? So there is tremendous amount of flexibility in enterprises today to make change, right? Especially if it is pushed by regulation. The second driver is consumption behavior, right? I can tell you, my son today, who's 13 years old, is so conscious about sustainability. In 5 years' time, he's going to probably have his own car. He's going to start consuming. He's going to become an insurance consumer, right? Consuming insurance, services, right? And I can tell you, he's probably going to look at something like a green score, right? Not just about the services and the products, but he will also place certain factor, for a carrier that prides itself in his green credentials, right? The third one is, I think the third driver is efficiency, right? And we saw during, thanks to COVID, there has been tremendous amount of push in digital and, everything to do with digital, right? What used to be brick and mortar today has become more digital, right? So the idea of infrastructure for an insurance company, which used to be offices, agents, phones, today has all gone web services, right? So I think you're seeing that digital transformation bringing in certain levels of extreme efficiencies in the process. For example, the idea of a straight-through claim, right, for a damage, which basically says that a claims adjuster need not travel, take a car, burn fuel, go to a place and see a damage for them to do, some assessment. The moment you make this straight through, what you're essentially doing is not only saving time and bringing in greater connectivity and greater customer approach, you're also basically saving, some amount of energy that's being spent. And you can do this for inspections. There are companies that have started using drones, for example, to inspect, large warehouses, factory setups, and so on and so forth, right? We've also started seeing AR, VR coming in some areas, right? Telematics has always been there in the insurance sector, to basically look at a very personalized way of giving, assessing risks, for example, especially in the auto and fleet, insurance, industry. So this is the third one. And the fourth one is natural disasters, right? I think, today when a disaster happened, people said this is an act of God, right? And the moment you put, force majeure, right? Once you have that, all bets are off, right? The customer is not made whole, which is the entire purpose of insurance. So, and again, you can look at much of data, and I rely on the US because they manage, and a lot of data is available. If you go to the EPA, for example, forest fires have really, have been increasing. For example, Texas has been under snow and ice. Texas, can think about it. 20 years ago, you would have never thought Texas is going to be a cold place, but today it is. All thanks to the climate change. So our ability to even predict natural disasters is no longer, is no longer an option to exclude, but something that we will have to look at. So the idea of using GIS information, for example, right, looking at trends of weather patterns, not over 2 or 3 years, but probably over decades, right? This is the kind of data that insurance company will start to rely on. Yeah, so I can go on and on, but I think I look at these 4 pillars, right, to be very, very important pivot points around which the insurance industry will change over the, let's say, next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. So one of the things, if I kind of, for me, one of the biggest takeaway that you mentioned here is the consumer behavior pattern, right? And I think if I look at consumer behavior, as you rightly mentioned, today's generation, the generation Z, Next, Y, whatever the name we can call it, is becoming so much increasingly aware of what is happening around them.
Right.
That the pressure that this generation will put on the corporates to make sure that they report things in a fair manner, they report things which are good for the environment, they do those actions, is going to kind of drive some of the products and solutions that the insurance companies are going to take. For example, one of the things I was just reading was there's this insurance group called Howden Group based in UK, and they incidentally launched world's first voluntary carbon credit insurance product to figure out that the companies which are declaring the carbon credits, are they really what they are doing, or can you insure against that itself? Now, if such kind of things are going to come in the market and the Gen Z is going to kind of consume it, what also then equally becomes important is to say that, yes, digitalization, which the Gen Z is very, very comfortable with, is going to take these kind of products into the next level. So what you said, saying satellite imagery, drones, usage of IoT, usage of data, AI, all of this will propel the insurance companies to go more and more sustainable in what they do. But then my next question to you is, while they are doing this in a more and more way to become sustainable, is there a flip side to all this digitalization which is there? So is there also a factor that while I'm being so much digital in my effort to become sustainable, that digitalization itself starts costing me some credits which I should not have had in the first place? So how do you balance these things?
So okay. So I've got 2 perspectives on this, and I'll probably dwell on the first one a little bit more than the second. So let's look at, when we talk about infrastructure, right? I mean, we've got our primary, in fact, almost all the countries today are talking about infrastructure, right? India has been talking, we are on an infrastructure overdrive, building roads, ports, smart cities, right? All of these, this is infrastructure. In the US, again, if you better listen to Biden, he's been talking about revamping the freeway systems, building bridges, building, there's a lot of the hard infrastructure.
Yes.
Right? And we talk about infrastructure as hard, primarily to address this infrastructure was required for the industrial age. We created factories, and we wanted to take them from the hinterlands down to the ports, from ports down to the place where they were consumed. So that was the infrastructure in the brick and mortar economy. Today, that infrastructure, a lot of that is not being replaced, but a lot of the funding and money that used to go into the hard infrastructure is now going into the softer aspects of infrastructure, such as network, 5G, computing, cloud, all of those kind of things. Right? So, and we've also seen, a big movement to the cloud. Cloud can get in efficiencies at a scale that no number of data centers can, right? And it's been proven. And we still are learning to live with the economics and the scale of the cloud. At least in insurance, customers are still moving, but I think the progress is only becoming more, right? Now, cloud, again, there are many types of clouds, right? There was a very interesting experiment that not experiment, I think it's an offering now with Azure, where they've actually taken an entire data center and put it in the ocean, right? Because one of the key components of energy consumption in the cloud is, guess what, is actually keeping it cool, because so much of heat is being produced, right? So imagine you can take this and put it into the ocean, and the cooling is it's a lot more. I mean, yeah, you're heating up water, it probably contributes to that, but it's a very minuscule amount, rather than taking carbon, coal, and then burning it in generation, and then moving it out here. So those are some of the things that is happening in the IT infrastructure space. Now, if you're an insurance carrier, right, the question is how much of that you're going to be using, right? That itself will give you. There are carbon credits, carbon sequestration. I mean, there's a whole bunch of economy that is going to come out of the ways in which we can capture carbon, and you can get carbon credits itself, right? So that I think is one. Now imagine, while today, if you go to a comparison site, right? If you were to go to Policy Bazaar today in India, or if you were to go to any of the comparison sites in the US or UK, what you essentially get is a bunch of coverages telling you, take your car, here is your coverages, and here is the premium, right? Here a monthly premium that you pay. You might also give some amount of customer feedback, right? It's saying that, on a scale of 1 to 4, here is the service on claims feedback is 2. So yes, the very low premium, but the service really is bad, right? And those are the things that give you information, right, on the choice of the carrier that you want to go with. But imagine in the future that you also start putting in green scores. You mentioned about carbon disclosure and green, energy disclosures, right? Imagine if a company on a comparison site, you also say, guys, you know what, 5 rating on services, but 1 star, on green, right? Now, if you have an informed and a very green conscious consumer, they would not mind paying another $20, $30, 5,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees, whatever the currency is, to make sure that they get a higher green rated carrier. So I think that is one of the consumer movement that I think we will start seeing. Because I can tell you from my own son, who's 13 years old, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, he will have a vehicle and he will want an insurance for it, right? There's no getting around it. So that is one. The second one is the insurance companies typically, for a long time, have been trying to make people whole when a loss has happened. If you lose a car, we give you some money so that you can replace that car, right? Based on whatever it is. But increasingly today, and those were the only 2 touch points. In insurance company, there are only 2 touch points. One is when you buy the policy, right? And the second one is when you have a need, when you go to meet with an accident, or there's a fire at home or something, right? When there is a crisis, when you have a loss or a claim. These are the only 2 touch points that an insurance company today has. Because unlike a bank, you don't go to an insurance company every day and make a micro payment. It doesn't happen that way. So, and insurance companies today are also trying to get closer to the customer. Now, this is where I think peril notification becomes an interesting thought, right? For example, today through telematics, if your car is being broken into, right, can you, through the sensors that you have inside the car, can the insurance company alert, the owner of the car saying that, guys, you know what, somebody just broke your glass, in the car, and the car is parked out here. Here is your coordinates. Here is how it is parked. Can you do something about it? Right? That's one. Second one is, imagine you're driving, and you're actually driving into an area where there is a hurricane or a cyclone coming in, right? Or when there's a flood happening. Now, that information typically does not go. You don't know about it till you go there, or you might hear it in the news or whatever, right? But in case all of those things, those options are closed, imagine an insurance company through notifications and information that they get can actually figure out, here is a car going into this place, which is due for a flooding in the next 1 hour, or you're driving into a place where there's a hurricane coming in. Imagine that notification. So that is actually a view that many insurance companies are talking about now. There is enough of this data coming in from government agencies. There are data brokers who can actually give you, this kind of information, right? So there are two things that happen. One, yes, as a consumer, you're going to get notified, which basically makes it safer, and that becomes a key differentiator. The second one is, for an insurance company, the claim actually reduces. If I can notify you, right, it means that there's a chance that you will not get into that peril, right? You'll not be affected, by a loss situation, right? So those are some of the things that you will start, that I think insurance companies are really looking at. So consumer behavior, yes, we spoke about that in the first part. The second part is, how can a company get closer, a carrier get closer, to a person who's holding a policy. So these are two big movements in my view, Archana.
Yeah. So if I try and sum up some of these points, Brijesh, the first and foremost factor is that there is a huge opportunity for insurance companies in this whole sustainability space, right?
Right.
The opportunity in terms of changes to the existing products and solutions that they have. Second, opportunity to bring in newer products to address some of the changing consumer behavior, right? The fact that you said that if you have a sustainability score, you may be able to attract new demographics of Gen Zs who are more aware about this. The third aspect, what you also mentioned about the digitalization part, where earlier it may have been difficult for you to predict what that claim number could be or what your payment and liability could be, now is going to become much more easier. And that is not just beneficial for you, but it's going to also benefit the society, because through that, if you can reduce some accidents, through that, if you are able to reduce some loss of life, loss of property, that is going to be much, much better. So it's also going to contribute to your social aspect. So it's going to affect your ecology aspects, it's affecting your social aspect as well. And that way, if the insurance companies continue to focus, rather than waiting only for the regulators to tell them to focus, they will have a first movers advantage in the industry. What I would like to do next, Brijesh, is that this topic is vast, and there are a lot of these nuances that you brought in to say, how can you bring in the digital infrastructure? How can you make sure the digital infrastructure you're building itself is efficient, and how you can bring in the cloud aspect? So we would love to explore these topics with you as well in detail, and would love to have you again to talk about some of these things with our audience in the coming few fireside chats. So thank you so much, Brijesh, for joining us today, sharing your insights around this topic. And thank you, listeners, for listening in.
Thank you, Archana. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Just fantastic to be part of this discussion with you and EcoITCon. Always a pleasure to discuss, futuristic ideas and, industry trends.
Thank you.